Hello and welcome to Downloading Soon, the new podcast we have started on our channel. My name is Dan. Next to me, Uncle Chunt.
Yep,
and
me.
To his right is Jamie.
You forgot
Jamie
your own,
Nero.
You forgot your own name then.
Yeah, I know. Almost said it for you.
There was like a 4-second pause where you were like, "What the fuck's my name?"
Yeah, I did.
Damn.
That's fine, but we're getting through it. So this is Downloading Soon. This is a new podcast we've started. This is our second episode where we talk about a game that you will hopefully be able to download soon. Where even if you buy it physically, you'll be able to download a patch as well.
Yeah.
But
I'm pleased you threw my tagline in.
Yeah. Hey, you didn't use it last episode, so I get to use it. I created it first. It's there. It's digital. You can't digitally alter this shit.
Punch on.
This week we're speaking about Spiderman Miles Morales, a game which we know is coming this holiday to the PlayStation 5. Other consoles, don't know yet. And
Xbox.
That's what we're going to segue into about what we do know about this game. Good thing is we don't actually know that much, so there's a lot of room for interpretation. But some of the things we do know it will be an optional playable at 4K 60 frames per second. We know it's set at Christmas time. Miles is living in Harlem with his mum, and it's a game that is somewhat like Lost Legacy, where it is a standalone game, but not quite as big as the regular Spider-Man on PS4. Just wanted to know, is there anything else you guys wanted to add to that, or should we get into what we want out of this game?
Needs more Ben Riley.
Jamie, surely you've got some comments on the 4K 60 frames.
Look, yeah, but no at the same time, because I mean, it should just be standard for the next generation of consoles, right? I mean, I think people in the whole 4K 60 debate are getting lost a little bit in terms of just exactly what that means and what it's going to be. 4K 60 can't actually be done at max render full assets for most high-end PC graphics cards, right? You dial everything up in Red Dead or in what's really demanding in terms of a game. Even the Master Chief Collection on PC, you dial everything up 4K 60, unless you are rocking like a Titan RTX card, like you're not getting 60 frames a second. So the fact that they have that 60 frames a second mode is great, but people that are expecting you're going to be able to put 4K 60 in and still get maybe the same visual fidelity that you're going to get at 4K 30 are mistaken. You're going to get better motion, but some of those textures are going to change, some of the shadows are going to change. The overall image quality may actually degrade. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see kind of what the baseline is. And this also makes me think, again, I know you say, oh, what do we know? We don't know for sure, but this makes me think it's coming to PS4. And it'll come to PS4 in the same modes that were available for Spider-Man.
Anything to add there, Chant?
Oh, look, I'm still living in the world of a 1080p projector, so that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. You know, if it's 60 frames, 1080p, woo, cool, I'm there. But that's if this game still comes out while I still have my PS4. You know, I do want to play it, and I'm interested to see how they explore Miles Morales. Like, he does have a big fan base. It's no denying that. He's a generation's worth of people's Spider-Man. Like, it's no longer Peter Parker is the main one for a whole slew of people. So it's a big deal. It's not. I'm more invested in Peter Parker and a lot of his stories back in the comics and stuff. So I'm kind of tied to that. But as far as the game goes, I don't really care if it's 4K 30 or 60 frames or whatever. Cool. And Jamie's right. There's no way in hell these consoles, like some of the graphics cards that you need to run what they're expecting, cost more than both the Series X and PS5 combined. Yeah. You know, so yeah, temper your expectations, people.
Another thing I heard this week, which I hadn't thought of, is the idea that, if this game takes into consideration ray tracing, then therefore you wouldn't have 4K 60 frames. Like the idea, if you want to use ray tracing, you have to bump it down to those lower settings.
Yeah, and to give kind of an insight on that, so the game I tried quite heavy ray tracing with on PC. So I've got an RTX 2080, and I tried to use ray tracing in Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 for me, with no ray tracing, was hitting 4K 70, 80 frames a second with pretty much everything maxed. Some settings dropped down, like not complete ultra resolution, but pretty fucking good. As soon as you turn ray tracing on, my performance hit went below 30 frames a second. Now I turned ray tracing on for everything. I think there's 3 separate options. Turned all 3 of them on, and I dropped below 30 frames, which is unplayable for a shooter. So just to give an insight to the impact that ray tracing has at a hardware level, and that's the buzzword that's been thrown around by both Microsoft and Sony. It's hardware accelerated ray tracing, right? It's not software, it's hardware. So the hardware does take a real gut punch when you start applying things like ray tracing.
So in terms of what we know, we can start talking about what we want. I'd just like to give a quick recap. We did a spoiler room for the Spider-Man PS4 earlier this year because you guys finished it off. I platinumed it this year, but played it a few years ago. And one of the things that Jamie wanted was less Miles. So I don't feel like in this game you're going to get your wish.
Sadly
you
not.
also wanted... And mind you, we were speaking specifically about a Spider-Man sequel, but you also brought up adding more Marvel heroes to the story. Chris Chunt was very, very, very into his Clone Saga and Carnage and Venom.
Hell yeah.
Very excited about that. I was talking about starting a game with Miles and transitioning to Peter Parker, and also the idea of making your own suit. Some of this we'll get. Probably the Miles stuff we'll get in this game. But let me start with you, Chunt. What do you want out of Spider-Man Miles Morales that might be different to what you want out of a Spider-Man 2 sequel?
Well, look, I don't know enough of Miles Morales outside of Into the Spider-Verse and his origin in the comics. So,
which, by the way, that film is fantastic. Put that out there.
It's quite good.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've all seen the Miles Morales.
Yeah. So anything outside of that is going to be a surprise. So I really don't have much expectations for it. That's not a slight, but my God, like part of his power set is the invisibility stuff, and hate is a strong word, but I wanted to just not do the stealth missions, and I fear that they're going to like lean right heavy into that because I don't know. Is he going to be more? Is this 2 years later or something, where he's a more seasoned Spider-Man, or is this like he's learning the ropes, or is he just fresh out of training with Peter? So how soon is he in the suit? Because he's got his own suit in this game. He's not just a hand-me-down thing. So yeah, look, if they keep it more action-oriented, if it's a smaller game, I don't anticipate that they'll pad out the game, with a lot of those stealth stuff, because it's a waste of time. If it's a Lost Legacy type story or expansion or solo game, I don't imagine they'd waste too much time on all the like external or the more useless parts of the game that nobody liked. I'm sure they got plenty of feedback from that stuff, man. Like, but two of the 3 of us here don't like those missions. You're more tolerant about it than we are. So, and I don't know who the hell these villains are. He just looks like he was fighting someone that looked like him just then. Who knows, man? I just hope there's Ben Reilly in this game, and I hope the Jackal's in there, and I hope there's some kind of storyline where oh wait, they've already done that. Oh damn. Can we everybody's played Spider-Man 1. Spoiler if you haven't already, bugger off. Where Aunt May dies at the end of the first game. That was part of the Clone Saga storyline, so they're kind of already going there, you know what I mean? So like I'm trying to really hope for this. You know, I just want to add at the end of the first game where you see Harry Osborn and he's got the symbiote in the canister with him. I mean, it's all there, right? The symbiote's there. You can get the black costume out. Aunt May's dead. There's gene technology stuff with DNA and whatnot, and they can clone Peter. You know, well, maybe this is just a stopgap of a game until the actual Spider-Man 2 game comes out.
Yeah.
And it's like, this Miles Morales game is for Jamie, and then when they do Spider-Man 2 game, this is for Chunt, and it's going to be bigger and better, you know? That's what I think.
Jamie? I think you can take my buzz.
Rebuttal.
No, it is. It's definitely going to be that stopgap. But I, much like you, Chun, I want to know what happens next. I want to know what's next in Peter's story. I'm happy that Miles is getting this game, that he's getting, you know, to explore whatever stories he's going to get to explore. I think it's just a case of, is it going to be a cash grab? And is it only going to come to PlayStation 5? And is it going to be a system seller when it doesn't really need to be on that system? And yeah, I just feel for people who are invested in it that way. But it's definitely a stopgap. You're completely right. Are we moving into terms of what we want from it? That's where we're at, right? Yeah, sorry,
that's where we're on.
Completely missed that pointer. So for me, I want less stealth, as Chunt said. Yeah, we both really didn't like that. I want more time flying around the city as Spider-Man. Story-wise, I'm hoping for a bit of a payoff for Miles. I can see them interweaving the whole, you know, the death of his father kind of into the story somehow, or maybe protecting his mother, or even if we lean into the Spider-Verse kind of territory, it's his uncle, isn't it? Is it his uncle that winds up being a villain?
His uncle.
I can see that being written in somewhere. I quite like that. I'd be open for exploring that. I'd be keen for him maybe to be a villain, and you know, see what Insomniac's take on that story might be. And I also think there needs to be a passing of the mantle in a way. Now, I don't want Peter to pass the mantle completely. It's like a stopgap passing of the mantle, because like we said, I want the next Spider-Man game to be focused around Peter and what goes on with the symbiotes and that part of Spider-Man. I still want that. So you can't pass the torch completely to Miles and then go, you're now Spider-Man. It needs to be now, you are now a Spider-Man. And maybe we get to a case after 2 where, you know, we start looking at Gwen and we've got, you know, there's Miles, there's Peter, and there's Gwen, and you know, you're starting to build up this team of Spideys essentially. I'd be interested to see how they do that. I really, in terms of want, like I said, I want it to be a partial passing of the guard. Maybe Peter and Mary Jane are going away and getting married and going on holiday for fucking 6 months, and you know, they're not going to be around, and it's like, oh, Miles has got to look after the city while Peter's gone. I think that will be the way that they go about it. In terms of everything else, gameplay can stay exactly the same. I think it'll be hilarious if he has an affair with Black Cat, just because I want more Black Cat in every part of Spider-Man. You know, Peter comes back and Black Cat's just like straddling Miles. I think that'd be quite hilarious. But the gameplay and functionality of everything can stay exactly as it was. I'll be interested to see the powers. You know, there's some that obviously are shared between Peter and Miles, and Chunt, as you said, there's the invisibility that Miles has. That's his big deal. Not too keen for that. Chunt, you've already alluded to it. You know, I think our opinions on what we want from this are very similar. I don't want that to then become a focus and we're having a stealth mission around everywhere, because it's just going to get boring very, very quickly. I want more, you know, ripping canisters off of planes and, you know, firing massive spiders at groups of enemies and having them have to fight off different kinds of explosive webs and all kinds of shit like that. That's what I really enjoyed about Spider-Man. So yeah, for me, that's all they've kind of got to do. Keep everything the same, but, you know, less of the stealth stuff, which I am very worried about.
I want to add, Jamie,
for
what you were describing about Peter Parker potentially retiring and passing the mantle and going away with Mary Jane and all the points that I just brought up before. This is all sounding very much like the Clone Saga. It's exactly what happened. Like, Ben Reilly came in and the conversation turned out that he thought he was the original Peter Parker, or is the real Spider-Man, and Peter Parker's like, oh, I must be the clone or something. I'm going to go away then, and I'm going to have a baby with Mary Jane. And he passed the mantle on to Ben Reilly to be all like, you're now Spider-Man. I've had my time. I want to go live a life now. So this is all sounding like it's really setting up the game for me when the real Clone Saga begins. I'm very excited. This is getting more hyped. Like Miles Morales, whatever, cool.
You've just got to be careful then, though, how they bring it back around. How do you give the mantle back to Peter to do the Norman story and to do the whole Osborn arc and give us Green Goblin and what you have to assume is Spider-Man 2, right? But how do you do that?
Well, part of that story is, obviously that story went through all that, where they came back around full circle of like, oh, it turns out Ben Reilly was the clone the whole time, and there's a villain called the Jackal, and he was all about the cloning technology, and he cloned Gwen Stacy and brought her back to life, so to speak, and that fucked with Peter Parker's mind, and so, and it's all there. Like, I want that game. I love that story. It's most people that's a Spider-Man fan hate it, but like I'm not so tied to Spider-Man, and I seem to really like that storyline. I'm one of the few people on Earth that'll be like, yeah, Clone Saga rocked, man. Like, it was making so much money at the time, they just kept it going for 2 years longer than it should have, and it just got convoluted and shit. But there's key points in there that are like really good story points that you could really condense a good story down on it. But yeah, Miles Morales, that's who we're talking about. I honestly don't know enough about the character to really critique much of his history, like outside of the ultimate line of Marvel Comics, where that's where he came from. This Ultimate Universe, which is like a rebooted Marvel universe to start over, new takes and stuff, and that's where he was born from. And then in the comics, worlds collided and shit, and he merged into the main 616 universe with the real Peter Parker and stuff. So,
is there a world in the game that happens, do you reckon? Is there a world where Peter and Miles are in the same existence, right? They're in the same universe. Do you see a Into the Spider-Verse like thing maybe being able to happen, whereby one of them's torn out of this reality and goes and lives in another one, and then you can have your Miles Spider-Man games and you can have your Peter Spider-Man games?
Well, I mean, this game, the first game... Sorry, Dan. That's all right. Not to cut you off. Just nerd talk and
right.
Spider-Man comics and shit. This game, the original Spider-Man that we played on PS4, it was not alluding to any kind of like wacky comic book stuff. Like it was realistic, so to speak. Those wacky like mechanics grounded and stuff. Yeah, real grounded. That's a good word. Thanks, Dan. And
except negative, man. Yeah, grounded.
Except negative, man. But that was based on technology, though. Like he was given the powers, or the abilities were thrust upon him from a scientific experiment gone wrong. Typical of most of the Marvel characters. And so if they were just to go sharp turn and go whams, alternate universes and multiverse and stuff, I mean, there's nothing saying they can't. I mean, they did it in Into the Spider-Verse, which is like, here it is. This is a technological science experiment, rips reality apart, multiple Spider-Man and whatever. So, I mean, I'm not going to say no. And I think it'd be like corporate synergy, with Sony and Disney, and weaving this as a particular Earth in the Marvel Universe that ties into all the other realities that the movie of the Into the Spider-Verse went into and stuff. I mean, they could work it in somehow. All you could do is like be swinging around, and then a random mission pops up with a cinematic with some explosion, and that references the movie Into the Spider-Verse, and you go there and you're introduced to other Spider-Man. Who knows? The possibilities are endless with the multiverse, but it would be a very sharp turn, I think. Maybe at the end of this game, Miles Morales, maybe at the end of it, it's like setting up the real Spider-Man 2 game, where it's, all right, now we're going full hog. Who knows?
Well, I feel like it has to, right?
At length.
Spin-off or not, it's got to have a through line if it's going to influence or be a part of Spider-Man 2, which we assume is going to happen in the next sort of 3 or 4 years.
Well, Chunt, a few weeks ago, you dashed my dreams. I'm not going to do that to you, because this is talking about what we want. So, if that's what you want, you go ahead and keep dreaming. I'm not going to dash those dreams on you, okay? But in terms of
awful big of you.
But so one of my predictions for Spider-Man 2 when we did the spoiler room was, that you could start off as Miles in that game, because one of the hardest things in games to do is when you're doing a sequel to be like, why doesn't he have all the tools that he had at the start of the next game? And that's why I thought, you start off as Miles and you learn, and then you become Peter later on because Peter comes back or whatever. Basically, this is the whole game of that, where you're starting off as Miles, you start from beginner. I don't think we had a clip, and I should have pulled you up, Jamie, and let you know about it. But after that announcement, it was about a week later, Insomniac were talking about the game, and they actually had a clip, and in that clip you see Miles in his suit and Peter Parker in his suit, kind of like showing him the rope, like directing him like on where to go or what to do type thing. So I do feel like the start of this game will be like Miles like training with Peter, and then like you mentioned, Peter and Mary Jane going away for a period of time, being like, we went through all that stuff, we're trying to reconnect, which that game ended on, which then back together, and it's like, we want to reconnect, we're going to take away. How about you take over for a few weeks? What could go wrong? That's that type of storytelling. And then Miles is dealing with his own thing. He's dealing with the loss of his dad, which I feel like is a perfect opportunity for his uncle to come into the picture and be like I lost my brother, like I'm here to help out you and your mom type stuff, and you have that connection. And then like we were talking about this before the podcast started, Chunt, where it's like all Spider-Man stories have some type of connection to both the alter ego as well. So the Peter Parker and the Spider-Man, this is Miles Morales, and when he's been Miles Morales Spider-Man, do you call him Spider-Man still? Yeah. But in terms of gameplay, the invisibility you guys have touched on, that's a clear stealth action, but I think you can be much more dynamic than just being on the ground, like you've seen in the video here. But also, he's also got the electric shock as well, which I think adds something different. Like his costume, they can say Peter Parker made it because Peter Parker makes all his costumes. Hopefully they have a lot of varied costumes for him, because he doesn't have that many in the comics. Like he's pretty much, the black suit with the red outline a lot of the time. It doesn't change all that much. But yeah, in terms of the story, like I hope they just give other villains, not just his uncle, but a lot of the great stories that I like hearing about Spider-Man is when they pick a random ass character, random ass villain, and turn it into something actually really surprising and cool, whether that's in the movies or in the even in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. What's it called? No, Into the Spider-Verse movie. The fact that like gender bending Doc Ock and that, like that was a total surprise. Like doing something cool like this, I've just looked up some random villains that he's gone up against, like Omega Red, Kangaroo.
Omega Red. That'd be sick. I forgot about that.
I think Mysterio could be a really cool low-level villain to do something different with. It's like someone that's playing with him, especially coming off the most recent MCU movie. Also,
Jake Gyllenhaal's a handsome bastard, isn't he?
He's very handsome. I'd go there. In terms of stealing one of your things, Jamie, the fact that they've said that he's living in Harlem these days, and just a nod, just something for the Harlem hero. Just put in Luke Cage somewhere.
Yes.
Like it'd be so good for him to be around.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Christmas.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much what I want. I don't think we're in terms of going into what we think now. I think it's unrealistic to see the city change too much. It is a short turnaround. I know they obviously have a team working on the sequel to the Spider-Man on PS4, but you can't expect too much change in terms of much of the gameplay and much of the city itself. Jamie, what do you think they're actually going to bring us?
Well, I think if it's not coming to PlayStation 4, something has to change with the city. Something has to change with the environments and the world. And to do that, I think it has to become more densely populated, right? There's been a few people like pointing towards some of the, is it in-engine stuff from the trailer showing and depicting that New York is busier and it's more bustling and there's more people around.
Christmas time.
Yeah, it's Christmas time, so like they have made changes in that kind of thing. But I think you're exactly right. I think the world will remain very similar. I think the only change we're really going to see is who's Spider-Man. I don't think the way they tell the stories is going to change. I don't think the way that they traverse the world will change, not drastically anyway, other than adding a few powers in and giving a bit of an up-res to the texture pack that is the city. They've already said that, as I alluded to earlier, though. If we're pushing 4K 60 and they do want to turn everything up a notch, you're not gonna hit 60 with a lot of those improvements there. So it'd be interesting to see. It's one of those things where I think in all honesty, I need to see more. I don't think, because this is a kind of it's almost a mid-gen refresh, isn't it? It's almost like it's a transition, so not a lot's going to change, but hopefully it does start to show some of the capability of the tech as to what we can expect from the next Spider-Man game. And if they don't do that, I think they shoot themselves in the foot, because the narrative is quickly going to become, why isn't this available on PlayStation 4? And you don't want that to be the narrative. You want the narrative to be, holy shit, this is an awesome Spider-Man game. So yeah, I think they're going to have to show us something that's using the technology. Otherwise, yeah, I'm going to be in that camp of, why can't the hundreds of millions of people with PlayStation 4 accounts, or whatever stupid number they're at, play this game? Why is it locked into the PlayStation 5? So yeah, that's kind of where I see them going. I don't see anything changing. I just see the character changing to Miles, and maybe a bit more dense population around the city of New York around the Christmas period.
And you have to think that, this game wouldn't be made in such quick succession if a PlayStation 5 was not coming out. Like you obviously want a game to release with the PlayStation 5, but like you gotta take advantage of something. Chant, what do you think? What do you think we're going to get? Do you think they're going to follow any of what we've said, or?
Well, you have to imagine that they saw the success of how quick the game was selling when the first game came out, that the expansions, or this was already a planned expansion, right? You'd have to assume, based on how successful it was. And then, I don't know, Sony's got the mandate of, what is it? Is it games that are released or in development after July have to go to the PS5? Was that the mandate?
Yeah, so anything that's getting put onto the PlayStation Store, or anything that has to get checked by PlayStation, has to be able to run on both.
After July, right. So this would qualify for that. Yeah. So, they'd be stupid to rebuild the city, right, for just a new machine. Like, it's a smaller game, a smaller experience. They're going to be reusing a lot of the PS4 assets. And I think if you look back at that demo that they showed off of the load times and how fast you can swing through and render the world, that they showed some footage leaked online where someone was displaying how quick the SSD is on Spider-Man 4, Spider-Man PS4. So you'd have to imagine even back then, like they were kind of working on it and planning how to get this game or this engine over. So I think it'd just be dumb, man. Like, you're risking a minority character like this, in not to get political, but in this current time, in locking a character that's a minority character on a new console that not everybody can afford, and the people that are represented by that character, right? A lot of them probably can't afford their PS5 right now, just judging by how that country is at the moment. It would be silly not to release it on PS4, just for the sake of sales, like Jamie said, on hundreds of millions of PS4s that are out there. And it's a good chance to get the character the limelight it deserves as a fan favorite amongst that community. There's those reasons as well, besides what we really want, that this character is important for and should get the audience and the viewing that it deserves, right? So I think they'd be shooting in the foot as using this game as an excuse to kind of shovel people over to the PS5. I think this one could get away with being a cross-generational purchase, even if they maybe do a smart delivery-esque thing with it. I think that would be very, unfortunately for them, it'd be very consumer forward, giving them options rather than giving them a forced step onto next gen. I think those reasons that I just described are more important, I think, than anything else. So let's see what happens. How many months away is it now? We don't even have a release date locked in for the PS5. So who knows?
Holiday window.
Yeah. So it could be this year, or it could be first month of next year. Who knows? So yeah, look, yeah, I don't want to get too political about it, but it's worth saying because that character does mean a lot to to a subsect of people. And and a wide audience as well, not just them. But just be sensitive about it. Don't shoehorn the character. And I'm keen to play it. It's Spider-Man, right? Like, I do toot my own horn of like, oh, DC, fucking Xbox, rah, rah. But I bought a PS4 to play Spider-Man. That was the main reason I bought the PS4 for. And you'd be goddamn, I'll be bloody salty if I can't play it on the PS4 when it's essentially using the same assets, right? PS5 is just going to be like equivalent to a 1X upgrade enhancement, and with the fast SSD. I think it's just dumb. End of story.
One thing I want to bring up before we finish up, there were talks this week about rumors of, when Spider-Man Miles Morales comes out, it will come in with a copy of Spider-Man PS4 with it. If it doesn't come with that, do you think they will sell this at a cheaper option than, if we're just using the American money, cheaper than the $60 amount or the $70 amount, and they just sell it at $40? Or do you think they're packaging in Spider-Man PS4 with it so they can sell it again at $60, $70?
I think that's your nail. They'll include a copy of Spider-Man and it'll be $60. And that'll be their justification for it. It's going to be a full price game. No way around that.
So, Spider-Man PS4 on the PS5 with Miles Morales.
Yeah, as a $60 game.
Well, I mean, I can see why they would do it, but it just leaves more reason of like, well, why can't this be on the PS4 then? You'd have to imagine that if maybe they're bundling it in because it needs the first game to have the world that's in that game, and this is legit an add-on. This is legit sharing the assets from that first game, and that's why they're bundling it together. That's just how it sounds like to me. Just hearing that, I was not aware of that. I didn't know that the first game was coming with this one.
I think it's only rumor at this
just
point.
rumor at this point.
Yeah, and if it does, you're exactly right. It has to come to PS4. And if it comes to PS4, then yeah, all right. It's what do they do them at $35-$40? These smaller titles. Yeah, so it comes out at $40, or you can get it on PlayStation 5, and it's a full $60 game. That's the way I see it happening.
So the only thing I'm still holding on, if they're trying to sell this as a standalone game, if you're trying to sell it as a standalone game, you sell it as a standalone game. Like there's no point in bundling it in with another game, because then you are pointing out like this is an add-on, like Chun said. The other thing is that with Insomniac, with the Ratchet and Clank game, we know that they are happy if they feel to sell a game at $40, because that's what Ratchet and Clank came out as when it launched in 2016, and they've obviously sold enough to make a sequel. Like they've done it before, Insomniac, and I feel like they will do it again. And with everything Xbox are doing with Game Pass, if you can say, here's the PlayStation 5, and you might be spending $70 on 2K or $60 on Cyberpunk or whatever the other third party stuff is, but hey, we'll give you Spider-Man. Remember that game you loved, and it's $40. And then there's a very good chance that let's say you sell 2.4 million or 2 million consoles in the first month or whatever the PS4 record was. If you get most people buying Spider-Man, that's what Sony wants. And if it's the cheapest AAA game out there, you're going to get more people to buy it. But yeah, I don't want to see it bundled, because then you're giving the impression that it's not its own game. And it
begs the question of backwards compatibility on the PS5 too. Like,
it does.
Just carrying on from what you're saying, like, not to cut you off, but it's continuing on what you're saying is, if they're bundling anything, and it's a PS4 game on a PS5, like clearly it's one of their most best-selling titles on that console. And if they're having any kind of backwards compatibility, that should be on the top of their list. So why wouldn't it? Would make sense if you do pre-order, say, Miles Morales, maybe it's a free download, the first game backwards compat. Like, I could see that as an incentive, if anything. And yeah. I'm really clutching at straws here, but
we've got to remember that was part of the conversation. PlayStation, when they were pushed on it, what's the guy's name that runs PlayStation now, Dan? Jim Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan, yeah. Ryan.
So he's like, look, we're looking at having the top 100 PS4 titles available to play on the PlayStation 5 as close to launch as they can. That was the only thing they've said about it. It was that they were looking at it, and they were looking at initially the first 100 titles with the idea that will grow. So if it is, Spider-Man's obviously in that top 100 titles, right? It's probably in the top 3 games that have come out for that machine in terms of, units sold of a game. I think there'd probably only be lifetime sales total. It's probably not surprising if it is the best selling, unless The Last of Us has overtaken it.
The third highest on the console.
Yeah, so it's clearly in there. And you know what? That makes the suck of ordering a PlayStation 5 better for someone like me, who can then go, I know that my Spider-Man game's there, I know that God of War's there, I know that all these other games that I hadn't finished on PlayStation are there. But then the question becomes, I think, a bit more largely about what PlayStation are doing rather than what we expect of Spider-Man. Either way, I think it's a full price game. I don't see this game coming out and being $40, irrespective of what they do. If they soften that by including Spider-Man PS4, then that's what they do. But I'm not convinced your marquee launch title for your brand new system is a discount game. I'm just not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I also feel like, one of his other quotes, Jim Ryan, was, that whole thing about we believe in generations. I don't feel like you make that comment and then be like, also, our main game that we're releasing for PS5, you can also play on PS4. Like, that's kind of going against the direction that they're trying to put forward to everybody, that no, you need a next gen console, you need the upgrade of these games.
But it's so anti-consumer. That's the problem. If everything points to the fact that there's nothing to do, and we're speculating because we don't know enough, but if everything points to the fact that this feasibly looks like it could be a PlayStation 4 game, yet you believe in generations, all right, tell me what is generationally different here. Tell me what cannot be done on PlayStation 4. Tell me how this is built from the ground up for PlayStation 5. That's the thing we need the answer to, and they've obviously not spoke about it yet. But do you think this shows up, or we get answers to this in the rumored August event for PlayStation?
The state of play, rumored state of play. I don't think we do. I think they're going to try and show some new stuff, and they will have their own little Spider-Man deep dive later on, like in a Game Informer thing, closer to the release date, when they actually know the release, like when they actually tell everyone what the release date is. Show different stuff at the state of play.
You don't
need to show off Spider-Man. Everyone knows what Spider-Man's like.
True. But this is Miles Morales. It's a new character, new game. But I would watch a state of play. Excuse me, like what they did with Ghost of Tsushima before that game came out. That had its own special thing, and that would be pretty cool. I think the game is big enough to warrant something like that. But yeah, that's a good point that Jamie made. It's a bit salty to kind of expect to upgrade to a new console with a what seems to be like a solo expansion. Yeah, it just seems a bit weird. Like it's a bit off. I don't know quite what it is. Put my finger on. Like if they're all about we believe in generations, then why bother with backwards compatibility? You know, even though that's still on the cards for them. Like if you say that quote, cut off completely. You know, lean right into it and say, nah, we like generations. PS5 it is. Don't have
think
plans for the top 100.
They've got to be careful, Chunt. Like they've got to be so careful, like because everybody's still dogpiling on Microsoft because the whole like, oh, Halo doesn't look like a next gen game, but you guarantee that people are not saying that about Spider-Man. The difference being, Sony have made that commitment to this is a completely separate generation. We believe in generations, whereas Microsoft have gone, we believe you should be able to play a game anywhere, and wherever you are playing it, you will get the best version of that game for where you are playing for the interim until the technology is just not viable anymore. So I think it's just that's a treading on eggshells moment for Sony, which is probably why they haven't clarified any of this, because I don't even think they know. I think they've waited and they've watched what Microsoft have done and they've gone, how do we spin this? Yeah, how do we spin this? Because the tide can change at the click of a finger. Like, video game fans are fickle as all hell. Like, absolutely fickle. All it's going to take is one misstep and PlayStation become the enemy. You know, they'll still be regarded in high regard by all of the fanboys out there, but one little mistake and one thing that goes against the messaging, you don't get to do that very often. 2 or 3 swings and 3 misses, and I think their messaging could get quite confusing, and it's heading there for me anyway. I know what I want it to be. I want it to be able to do the whole, yeah, all right, the top 100 games are available day one for you to re-download. If you own them on PlayStation 4, you can play them on PlayStation 5 with some enhancement. The confusing thing here is the 4K 60 performance mode. The fact that they've said that exists makes me think this also exists for the PlayStation 4, it's completely contradictory, isn't it? So yeah, I wonder if they keep that wrapped until pre-orders have happened.
Yeah. It's going to be late. As I said, I feel in like October area they will have their own little thing for just doing the Spider-Man stuff. Right now they're trying to do the launch of the PS5. The game will come after all that info. But we might wrap it up there, boys. Good discussion. Thank you for joining me, and thanks everyone for watching this one. Well, I'm assuming you're watching it, but yeah, thanks for watching me. It's late. I'm ready for bed, and thank you for joining me, Champ. Thank you for joining Jamie, and I'm off to bed. Good night, guys.
Yeah.